Hello, guys. Welcome to your third lecture for the course. Um, before actually start with the lecture itself, I'd like to touch base on a couple of things with you guys. Um, First and foremost, of course, I understand the current circumstances and things that we're going through. That we're going through, all of us, right now, globally, and I'm making sure that I am actually cutting a lot of the of the data that I'm giving you for this course. So I'm cutting it down drastically. In fact, I'm making sure that I'm not putting more or burdening you more with a lot of things to do, understanding the situation, and of course, bearing in mind that you know everyone is not really in the best of conditions right now, and we're stranded at home, and we have no way of really carrying on with everything in life. So when it comes to this course, I'm making sure that I'm not really putting a lot more on you. So as far as data goes, or the amount of information that I need, I'm cutting that to the minimum. So um, two things. First, I need your confirmation that the lectures that we're doing right now is fine. The quality is okay. If there are any downfalls to this, if there's anything that you see that could make it even better, let me know. I would really appreciate your reply into that. And also another factor. I mean, make sure that you're watching the lectures. There's a huge drop between the first and the second lectures in views. I mean, I get to see that. Everyone got to see the first lecture, and I could guarantee this. Everyone did. But the second lecture, not really. Probably half of you guys got to watch it. So please make sure that we are actually on track. And I'm supplying information through a lecture, and I also need you to supply me with a confirmation. That's all I'm asking. So please make sure to do that. Email me, all right? Do not comment in the YouTube itself. Actually, email me, write me, and let me know how it is. Most of you guys did. I mean, many of you guys did, but not everyone actually is doing this. So make sure that when I ask you for something, please. I'm not asking too much. I know I'm not. And I'm pretty sure that if you're taking any other courses, there are a lot on your shoulders for that. So I'm not trying to even burden you with more. um, if I see that this is working, then we could carry on. I could perfect it even more. We can make things or modify things around. I'm open for suggestions. True, there is a syllabus, and we're having to follow this, but I have the authority to change it. All right, and I could change things if I wanted to, if I don't see, that we're doing the right thing. So do the listening, please, and or watching the video. If you have the handouts that that Sarah, my TA, has supplied, that has sent you guys, then make sure that you're printing that, reading it, and listening. So read and then listen. Okay. Um, Another thing, this is just a reminder that we're only going to do this for the first week. I just wanted to see how this will be, and then from then on out, we're probably going to carry on with Zoom. Okay. Let me know what you think of Zoom. Let me know what you think of the lectures. I would like to know your feedback, all of you, please. All right. Okay, we'll get back to the lecture now. So, the Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra is a prime example of, or actually the final accumulation of about 300 or 400 years of trials of, human beings have been trying a lot of things to gather an ensemble, or to have a group of musicians or a group of instruments, if you will, actually play together at the same time. And of course, we have so many different cultures that try to do that or actually do that. But of course, things are just different. When it comes to an actual texture of music, the texture of a song, if you like to listen to songs, you'd notice that there is always a main line carried on by a singer. Let's say you're listening to a piece of music. There is always a main line that's carried on by one instrument or a group of instruments that just play the same notes together. And there are other layers, that actually make things a lot different. You get to actually, if you want to further your reading, you could actually read regarding the harmony with that. And of course, when it comes to Arabic music, it's different because there is not really much to talk about when it comes to harmony. But then when it comes to Western classical music, there's a lot of different layers that even enhance the idea. I mean, imagine listening to a singer singing by himself without a band. It's not going to be the same if you have 50 players behind him playing instruments, and he's the lead singer or the main line of melody, right? So when you have the orchestra playing a piece of music, always make sure that you know this. There is always the main or the most important element in music, and that is melody. Melody is it's the very first one in the elements, and it is very important because not only that you have to choose a very expressive instrument, an instrument that could actually deliver your ideas or actually have more expressions or more abilities to meddle or play with a melody or with a tune, to make it even better. And I'm pretty sure that we have lots of reference to things like that when it comes to melodies or tunes that we like by certain instruments or by certain groups or ensembles. Um, when it comes to an orchestra or a classical orchestra setting, we have hundreds of years behind us of trials of mixing and matching instruments together to see how or what would be best to work with to have the best result. And the setting that you actually get to see now of an orchestra playing, like the video that you got to watch, you notice that there are like 60 players sitting and playing. This setting has been in existence ever since 17 something. So it was the foundations of the setting is actually goes back to the beginning of the classical era. Of course, there are, the Renaissance, and then comes the Baroque, and then after that we have the classical era, and then the Romantic era is the 19th century, and then you have the 20th century. So imagine this. This has been the case for, probably like 300 years or more. That we have different instruments sitting in the orchestra in a certain way. Of course, bear in mind that this has to do with a lot to do with projection, because we're talking acoustical instruments, instruments that do not have mics, they don't have anything to help get your sound or the instrument's sound even further away. So you have an issue with projection. Okay, imagine listening to someone playing the trumpet, brass instrument, known to be very loud, and playing the same line of music or playing at the same time with a guitar. It's not going to sound, you're not going to be able to hear the guitar, because for one, the trumpet could play a continuous sound where the guitar is only one twang and then the sound fades out. Okay, where in an instrument that plays, like the violin, for instance, you could have a continuous sound. So, okay, so that's how we actually get to notice when we listen a lot to music. Okay, so in an orchestra setting, knowing that we have instruments that are louder than others, then of course you get to hear, or you have to have the instruments that sound the least up front, and this, the instruments that sound the most way in the back. And that is why you have percussion instruments all the way to the back. Imagine the percussion sitting up front, then of course you're not going to be able to hear most of the melody, the other layers of supporting or counter melody or supporting sound that enhances the idea even more. Okay, so when we have an orchestra setting, there's always string instruments up front, and by the way, string instruments make up about 2/3 of the orchestra. Now, why is that? It's simply because of projection issues. So you have to have the instruments that sound the least up front, and that's why you have violin, the string instruments in the front of the stage, and then right behind them you have the woodwind instruments and brass instruments. okay, on two rows, and then all the way to the back you have percussion instruments. Um, String instruments, the string family is huge. I mean, if you were to name instruments, you have the mandolin, you have the guitar, you have the lute, and you have lots of instruments that actually were members at some point in time in the orchestra. But not only that, they went through trials as well, but didn't really work for them, and that's why composers didn't really favor them. They didn't really want to have, they actually prefer a lot more to have the violin family over the guitar. But of course, there are some works that have or include the guitar or include the mandolin or any of those instruments. But we have something that's kind of similar to them in the string family. That's a core member of the orchestra, and that is the harp. Of course, the harp is an instrument that has so many strings, and you get to hear a lot of it, and it really has like an angelical, sort of like a heavenly sort of sound, and that's like the stereotype known of or characteristics of that instrument, of this instrument. But there is not much, or like there is not a huge number of harps in the orchestra. There is usually one, if not then maximum two. But then here we have the violin family, I would call it, or the string section of the orchestra, made up of the violin family. Now the violin is a really old instrument, and of course, the older the instrument, like there are some violins that go back like to 300 years or even more in age. Of course, the older the instrument, the even better sound it would sound, and the more value it is, and usually the violin has four strings, and it has also a bow that goes with it. So you have four strings, and the sound is produced by drawing a bow against a string. So you have four strings, and you have a bow that goes against the string, and that's how the sound is produced. And that's a really important thing to know. How is the sound produced on an instrument? And that's really important for any culture. All right. So we have the violin, and always going to go from highest in pitch to lowest in pitch. So highest in pitch is the violin, viola, cello, and then last we have the double bass. Now, of course, all these instruments sort of like look the same, but they're different size. So you have the violin being the smallest, and then the viola is only a tad larger, but of course it's deeper in sound. And then they have the cello that requires the player to actually play it sitting down. So you actually sit on a chair and play, but you cannot play it standing. And there is the double bass, and you don't play the double bass sitting down on a chair. You actually get to play it standing or sitting on a stool. But then the violin family, the smallest, the one responsible for playing the melody, is always going to have the largest number of them as well. So you have two sections of violins, the first violins and the second violins. Both sections are responsible for playing the melody, mainly responsible for playing the melody. And they are very important because they have so much to do between playing melody or actually stepping back to give a chance to other instruments to carry on a melody, but then they're still going to have to play. The sound on the violin is produced by bowing, but also produced by plucking. Plucking is kind of like when you do it on the guitar. So, but then when they do it with their finger, for certain notes and all. But then mainly or most of the times you get to hear the violin is always going to be a continuous sound, a sound that carries on even more than just plucking. Plucking is always in the case of really, really soft, really piano, like we call it, soft music. So when they pluck, you get to hear them. Okay, they call it pizzicato. And then we have, of course, the violin is a full size. I'm gonna get even, more, and I'm gonna talk more about that too. That's an instrument that requires an early start, so you gotta, start probably by the age of 6 or 7, and that is why you get to have a smaller, tiny violin, and then, as one gets to grow, they actually have 4 sizes of that instrument. So you have a fourth, 2/4, 3/4, and a 4/4, or like a full size violin, and that's for grown-ups. But that's what you get to see in the orchestra. But before they actually get to join the orchestra, they had to probably stop, that's for sure, to start really, on a tiny violin as a child. And it's just an instrument that has no, and that's the main difference between the violin family and an instrument like the guitar. I mean, the guitar has has the has those marks. You get to see where you're gonna place your fingers to get to play the right notes. Where on the violin, viola, cello, or double bass, it's not marked. So you have to know it by playing a lot. Lots of experience for that is needed, because if not, then you have to, because you have to match with a group of probably 12 players or even more, playing the very same notes, playing the same everything, going up the bow and down the bow together to sound the same, kind of like the choir, or any choir has to sing together. They got to breathe together, they got to play the right notes together by matching with each other. So that's another issue that makes it even harder for string players to actually carry on any melody or play in an orchestra. So they have to really make sure to practice a lot and make sure that they are correct, because if not, they're going to stand out, and they don't want to stand out in a string section, because the conductor is probably going to be very pissed, very upset, and probably going to spell you out of the orchestra or something. But that's really a rare case. So you have the violin, and then you have the viola. The viola is a tad larger, but it's a shy instrument, if you will, because it doesn't have the brightness in sound. I hope you get to listen to the video of the Britain's Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra, because it really shows this. The violin is a very bright and very positive, sort of like gives a positive energy to a melody that when it gets to play it. But then, if in rare occasions the viola gets to have a melody to play, that melody is, the sound of the viola is really sweet, but it's really velvety, and it's warm, but it's kind of shady. It's kind of it's not like, it doesn't have that brightness in sound. So it's always an instrument that's responsible for playing the supporting lines, the enhancement to the violins. So when the violins are playing a melody, the viola most probably is going to have to be sort of like in its shadow, enhancing the sound for the violins. The third instrument is the cello, and the cello is the poet of the orchestra. It's a larger instrument in size, but it's like the equivalent of if we were to say the violin equals a female voice, then the cello equals a male's voice. So if you have a conversation between two, and one has to sort of sound like the female and the other is the male, then it's probably going to be the violin and the cello back and forth at it. But the cello is a very lyrical instrument, very expressive instrument, and it's a very important instrument, because it plays in such in the texture of music, or the spectrum of notes. It plays in the lower part, but it's not really low, but it's in the lower part of the spectrum of notes. So it sounds closer to a human being than a violin. And that's another reason for it to be called the poet of the orchestra. And I have a really nice recording, and I would recommend you guys to listen to it if you have the chance. You could log on YouTube and watch Yo-Yo Ma. Yo-Yo Ma is Y-O-Y-O and then space M-A. Yo-Yo Ma is a famous cellist, and he's been playing a lot now, but one of the recordings that I really like of him, and you're probably going to see it, is of him playing Bach cello suites. Bach cello suites. Bach is spelled B-A-C-H, okay, and suite is S-U-I-T-E. So you have Bach cello suites. If you get the chance to listen to that, you'd really appreciate the sound of that instrument. I really like it. It's one of the favorites anyways. Last of the string family, and largest, and also the lowest in pitch, the largest, in size of the family is the double bass. And the double bass is actually considered to be the backbone of the orchestra. It's actually the backbone of the orchestra in the idea of actually making sure that everything is sitting right where it's supposed to be. So it gives even more depth to the sound. Mozart said at some point in time that if you want to have the perfect orchestra, then you should have more double basses and cellos. You have to have more bass and more than actually the higher notes or the upper or the highest pitch notes. So the double bass is an important instrument, and it has a lot of things in common, by the way, with the smallest one, with the violin. In both the violin and the double bass, you could see them not only in an orchestra setting, you could see them in Arabic music setting, you could see them in jazz, you could see them in bluegrass, you could see them in pop music, you could see them in anything, anywhere. So viola and cello, you don't not really necessarily see them in any of that, but violins and double basses, they have some kind of a rivalry there. But back to the double bass. The double bass is an important instrument, and it rarely gets any melodies to carry on because it has such a low or a bass sound that does not really make it, favored by composers to play in a melody. But it is a very important instrument. It makes sure that everything is in the right place. Okay, that wraps it for today. And our next lecture, we're continuing with the woodwinds and brass, and then finally the percussions. Thank you very much, guys. I need your confirmation. All right. Thank you very much.